It began like any other expedition. A plan hatched over greasy diner coffee, a few too many beers, and a shared hunger for the unexplored. Caving, that was our thing. We weren't professionals, but we weren't idiots either. At least, that's what I kept telling myself. There were three of us. Me, the one who always pushed too far. Jake, the quiet, careful one, always checking the gear twice. And Louise, the storyteller. The guy who made every dark tunnel feel like the opening of an epic adventure. The cave was called Devil's Maw. That name should have been enough to make us hesitate. But it had no recorded maps. No tourist routes. No warning signs. Just rumors. Whispered stories about deep shafts and passages that seemed to move and breathe with the earth. We couldn't resist. We left the last paved road before sunrise. The desert greeted us with biting wind and silence so thick it felt unnatural. I remember how Jake hesitated at the mouth of the cave. "Doesn't feel right," he muttered. Louise laughed. "Perfect, then. Let's go meet the devil." We descended with ropes, our headlamps slicing thin lines into the darkness. As we went deeper, the temperature dropped. The walls closed in, and the sound of the world faded, swallowed by tons of ancient rock. Time lost meaning fast. We crawled through tunnels no wider than our shoulders, rappelled into chasms with no bottom in sight, and past chambers filled with glittering mineral formations that looked like frozen lightning. It was beautiful, unreal. Hours passed. We rested, ate protein bars, drank water from metal bottles that echoed in the silence. Then we split up. That was my mistake. Louise wanted to document a large cavern we'd found. Jake was checking rope anchors. I spotted a narrow crevice to the left, barely wide enough for a body. It looked different, not natural, like something had carved it out or something had come through it. I felt this strange pull, like curiosity mixed with dread. "Back in 5," I called out, tightening my headlamp and sliding into the gap. I remember the way the walls scraped my sides, the way the rock seemed to shift in temperature, cold 1 second, warm the next. I moved slow, careful, every movement planned. But about 20 feet in, I heard it. A soft tremble, then a sudden pop, like a branch snapping underfoot, except there were no branches here, just rock. Then came the rumble. It started behind me. I turned my head just in time to see dust, a wall of it, and then the rocks came. I tried to backpedal. Too late. The tunnel collapsed behind me, a thundering crush of stone and debris, sealing the way I had come. Everything shook. Then silence. I coughed, choking on the dust, my lungs burning. My hands reached behind, clawing at the rubble, trying to move it. It was solid, like the earth had decided I didn't belong here and slammed the door shut. I screamed. Not words. Just fear. Raw, animalistic. No one answered. My headlamp flickered. I tapped it. It steadied. I sat there, frozen in that narrow shaft, my knees drawn up, my heart pounding loud enough to echo. This couldn't be happening. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe they heard. Maybe they'd dig me out. I just had to wait. I checked my bag. Half a bottle of water. 1 energy bar. A multi-tool. No radio. No GPS. And the worst part? I hadn't told them which tunnel I was taking. Panic is like fire. At first, it flares hot. Then it burns out quick, leaving you cold and shaking. I lay there for hours. Or minutes. I couldn't tell. The dust settled. The silence returned. A silence so complete it made my ears ring. I tried not to move. Tried to save oxygen. But the thoughts came anyway. What if this is it? What if they never find me? What if I just disappear? Eventually, I had to move. Staying put meant death. I turned forward. The tunnel sloped down, curving slightly to the right. If I couldn't go back, I had to go forward. I began crawling. The floor was uneven. Sharp stones jabbed into my elbows, my knees, my ribs. I moved an inch at a time. Every breath loud. Every heartbeat echoing in my head. After what felt like forever, the tunnel opened slightly. I found myself in a cramped chamber, maybe 6 feet wide. It felt like a cathedral after the shaft. I sat up, drank a sip of water. I didn't dare drink more. I turned off my headlamp for a moment. Darkness. Total. Pure. Like ink spilled across reality. Not a single point of light. It was then I realized I couldn't even see my own hand. That's when the fear hit me hardest. I wasn't just lost. I was buried. Buried alive. I made a choice that night, or what I thought was night. I would not die in this place. I would find a way. Or I would die trying. But I wouldn't just lay down and wait. I carved a mark into the wall with my knife. Just a small one. A tally. Then another. One for every hour I felt pass. At first, it kept me sane. Later, it reminded me how long I'd been forgotten. I started talking to myself. Not out loud at first. Just whispers. My own name, memories, lists of people I loved. Eventually, I sang. I don't know why. Some childhood lullaby my mother used to hum. I cried. Hard. Not for help. Just grief. For the life I might not get back. Then came the noises. At first, I thought I was imagining them. A distant clicking. A soft shift. Water? Or footsteps? I held my breath. Nothing. Then, again. Like something moving. Not animal. Not human. I don't know what it was. Maybe just my mind breaking. But in that moment, I realized something horrifying. I wasn't afraid of dying. I was afraid I wouldn't be alone when I did. That's when I made another decision. I would not stay in the dark. I turned my lamp back on. I stood, or tried to. My knees buckled. I crawled forward again. The tunnel narrowed, then widened, then split. Left or right? I flipped a coin. Not really. I just picked. I crawled for hours. Bruised, bleeding, thirst clawing at my throat. My lips cracked. My eyes dry. Then, a breeze. Faint, cold, but real. Air. I followed it. It led to a vertical shaft, deep and smooth. Too smooth. No footholds. I screamed again. Still no answer. So I rested and began planning. Because if I was going to climb that shaft, I'd need every last ounce of strength I had left. And if I failed, at least I'd fail trying to reach the light. Then another, one for every hour I felt pass. At first, it kept me sane. Later, it reminded me how long I'd been forgotten. I started talking to myself. Not out loud at first, just whispers. My own name, memories, lists of people I loved. Eventually, I sang. I don't know why. Some childhood lullaby my mother used to hum. I cried. Hard. Not for help. Just grief. For the life I might not get back. Then came the noises. At first, I thought I was imagining them. A distant clicking. A soft shift. Water? Or footsteps? I held my breath. Nothing. Then, again. Like something moving. Not animal. Not human. I don't know what it was. Maybe just my mind breaking. But in that moment, I realized something horrifying. I wasn't afraid of dying. I was afraid I wouldn't be alone when I did. That's when I made another decision. I would not stay in the dark. I turned my lamp back on. I stood, or tried to. My knees buckled. I crawled forward again. The tunnel narrowed, then widened, then split. Left or right? I flipped a coin. Not really. I just picked. I crawled for hours. Bruised, bleeding, thirst clawing at my throat. My lips cracked. My eyes dry. Then, a breeze. Faint, cold, but real. Air. I followed it. It led to a vertical shaft, deep and smooth. Too smooth. No footholds. I screamed again. Still no answer. So I rested and began planning, because if I was going to climb that shaft, I'd need every last ounce of strength I had left. And if I failed, at least I'd fail trying to reach the light. I stared at the shaft for what must have been 20 minutes. It rose above me like the throat of some dead beast, dark, silent, and impossibly tall. I could feel the breeze stronger now, flowing down the tunnel and brushing against my face like cold fingers. That air meant something, an exit, a connection to the surface, maybe even salvation. But the shaft was sheer, vertical, smooth stone, maybe 30 feet high. No ropes, no gear. Just me, my hands, and what was left of my body. I dropped to my knees. My legs were trembling, partly from exhaustion, partly from fear. I ran my fingers along the wall, looking for anything, a crack, a bump, a ledge. Nothing. Just cold, flat stone. I pressed my forehead against it and closed my eyes. My head throbbed. My mouth was dry, the taste of iron and dust coating every breath. It would be easier to stay down there, I thought. Lie back, close my eyes, sleep. But sleep in the dark isn't rest. It's surrender. So I stood again, and I began to climb. I don't remember the exact mechanics of it. It was more animal instinct than human decision. I pressed my palms flat against one wall, wedged my back against the opposite side. It was narrow enough for me to chimney climb, inching my way upward, pushing with every muscle I had. I moved slow. So slow. 1 foot, pause. 1 hand, breathe. At 10 feet, my shoulders screamed. At 15, my calves started to cramp. At 20, I almost slipped. My boot skidded. A rock fell. I heard it hit the bottom seconds later. The silence that followed was louder than the fall. I didn't look down. Looking down is for people with options. I had none. So I climbed. I don't know how long it took. 10 minutes? An hour? Time had stopped meaning anything. Then finally, I felt the top. My fingers found an edge. I hauled myself up, collapsed onto the stone floor, and lay there panting, heart pounding like a drum in my chest. I had made it. Out of the shaft. But not out of the cave. The new tunnel was wider, at least. I could stand, barely. My knees ached, and the skin on my back was raw where I'd scraped it climbing. But I was alive. I moved forward, dragging my feet, careful not to waste energy. Every step became a calculation. Was it worth it? Was there a better direction? Should I have waited? And always the haunting question. Am I going in circles? The air was cooler here, which I tried to take as a good sign. Cool air sinks. If it was moving down into the cave, it had to come from somewhere above, an opening. A vent, maybe even daylight. I held on to that like it was oxygen. At some point, I stumbled. My foot caught on something. I fell hard, smashing my elbow on the rock. Pain shot through my entire arm like lightning. I rolled over, clutching it, tears springing to my eyes. And that's when I saw it. It wasn't a rock. It was a boot, half buried in dirt, old, faded, torn. There was a leg still in it. My blood froze. I crawled closer. It was a man, or what was left of one. A body curled into a fetal position. The clothes shredded by time. No obvious wounds. Just decay. I sat back shaking. He'd been here a long time. Long enough to become part of the cave. I checked his pack. Empty. No ID. Just scraps of paper, water damaged, unreadable. Who was he? A hiker? A climber? Another caver? I felt sick. He had been where I was now. Alone, lost, forgotten. I whispered a shaky prayer. Not for him. For me. Because now I knew exactly what kind of place I was in. This cave didn't want visitors. It kept them. I kept moving. Something had changed in me after seeing the body. The fear didn't just grow, it matured. It became something deeper, heavier. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about escaping his fate. I thought of my parents. My little sister. I saw her face in my mind, her goofy laugh, the way she used to beg me to take her on hikes. I couldn't die here. I wouldn't die here. Hours passed. I sang again, anything to keep my mind busy. I shouted at the rocks. I cursed the cave. I laughed. I cried. I argued with myself. But I kept walking. Eventually, the tunnel widened again and sloped upward. That was the first sign of hope I'd had in what felt like years. I picked up the pace, crawling when it narrowed, stumbling when it opened, scraping my shoulders and knees and palms raw. Then I heard something. A sound I didn't recognize at first. A rhythmic, dripping. I turned a corner and found it. A small pool of water, black as oil, but real. I fell to my knees and drank. It was cold and clean. I splashed it on my face, my lips, my neck, and I cried, because in that moment it felt like life again. Then came the sound. Faint, but unmistakable. A voice. I froze. I held my breath. Hello? Nothing. Then, after several seconds, hello. It was an echo. My own voice. I screamed louder, desperate, pleading, but no one answered. It was just me and the stone. Again. I collapsed onto the ground, whispering, "Please, please, someone." But only the drip of the water replied. I rested there for a while. I don't know how long. Eventually, I rose again. The upward slope was calling me. I followed it. My light was dimming now, the last bar blinking red. I whispered, "Hold on just a little longer, please." I turned another corner, and I saw it. Faint, distant, but there. Light, real light. Not from my lamp. Not from my mind. Sunlight. My heart exploded in my chest. I ran. I didn't think. Didn't look. Didn't stop. The tunnel grew brighter with every step. The walls became golden, warm, familiar. I felt wind. I heard birds. And then I was outside. I fell onto the sand, coughing, crying, laughing. The sun was blinding. The sky impossibly blue. I lay there, hands in the dirt, as the wind touched my skin like a mother welcoming a lost child home. I had made it. 72 hours. No food. Almost no water. No help. But I was alive. The cave hadn't kept me. I had escaped. When I finally opened my eyes again, I wasn't in the cave. I wasn't on the sand either. I was somewhere bright, white, sterile. A hospital room. I blinked slowly, my lips cracked, my tongue heavy. Beeping machines. the scent of alcohol and plastic tubing, the sharp sting of an in my arm. Then I heard it. A voice. Familiar. Soft. "Hey, you're awake." Jake. I turned my head slowly and saw him sitting in a chair beside my bed. His eyes bloodshot, his clothes wrinkled like he hadn't moved in days. He looked like hell. I probably looked worse. For a moment, I didn't say anything. Then, just above a whisper, I croaked out, "You found me?" He stood up, voice cracking. "No, you found yourself." They told me later how it happened. How Jake and Louise had searched for hours when they realized I hadn't come back. How they screamed into tunnels until their voices went hoarse. How they eventually had to hike out, call for help, bring a search and rescue team. But they couldn't find me. They searched for nearly 2 days. They were preparing for a body recovery. And then, I just walked out, caked in dirt, bleeding, barefoot, eyes wide. Louise cried when he saw me. Jake held on to me so tight I thought he might break my ribs. I didn't say much. I couldn't. Not yet. The doctor said I was dehydrated, exhausted, bruised, borderline hypothermic, but remarkably stable for what I'd endured. No broken bones. No infection. Just the kind of trauma you couldn't see on an X-ray. They kept me for observation. Gave me fluids, quiet, space. I spent most of that first day just staring at the ceiling. The white tiles were the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. Flat, predictable, safe. There were no echoes here. No darkness pressing in. No walls shifting behind me. Every time someone entered the room, I flinched. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw a rock. Stone. That body curled in the dirt. His face. What little was left of it. I wondered who he was. If anyone ever came for him. If he'd scream too. The nurses were kind, gentle. They spoke to me like I was glass. Maybe I was. Luis visited every day. He tried to lighten the mood. Cracking jokes, bringing candy, talking about plans for the next hike. But even he couldn't ignore the way I didn't laugh. The way I winced when someone shut the door too hard. Jake barely left my side. One night he asked, "What happened in there, man?" I didn't answer. Because how do you explain it? How do you describe hours of crawling through tunnels so tight they stole your breath? How do you tell someone that you talked to rocks? That you heard things? That you saw things? That somewhere deep down you believe the cave was alive? You don't. You just shake your head and say, "I don't know. I survived." And that's all people really want to hear anyway. After 4 days, they let me leave. Stepping outside again was like being born a second time. The air felt too big too fast. I remember shielding my eyes like a vampire, blinking at the sky, afraid it might swallow me whole. Home wasn't much better. My apartment was suddenly wrong. The corners too dark, the walls too close, the silence too loud. I slept with the lights on. For weeks. Every time I closed my eyes, I was back inside. Back under the earth. The dreams weren't violent. They were quiet. And that made them worse. I'd dream of crawling. Always crawling. And in the distance, the sound of breathing that wasn't mine. Sometimes I'd hear footsteps. Sometimes whispers. Sometimes I'd see the man again, the one in the cave. Only this time, he'd be sitting upright. Smiling. Waiting. My therapist called it acute stress response. He said it was normal. Expected. What he didn't say, what I knew, was that it changes you. Permanently. I couldn't go back to who I was before. That version of me, the cocky thrill seeker. The guy who laughed at fear, he didn't make it out of that cave. Someone else came back in his place. Someone quieter, slower. Someone who paid attention to the light. My parents flew in. They tried not to cry, but I could see it in their eyes. My mother hugged me like I was made of paper. My father held my hand and said nothing. And I realized then this wasn't just my trauma. It belonged to them now too. To everyone who waited, everyone who thought they might never see me again. I didn't know how to carry that. Still don't. Over time, I started walking again. 1 block, then 2. Then short hikes, away from caves, away from cliffs. Flat, open spaces. Sun on my face. Wind in my lungs. Luis came with me once. He asked if I'd ever go caving again. I said nothing. He nodded like he understood. We didn't talk much after that. The thing people don't tell you about surviving is this. It's not just the moment you escape. It's every single day after. The guilt. The memories. The way your brain tries to make sense of something senseless. People look at you like a miracle. They say, "You're so lucky." But they weren't there. They didn't feel the darkness wrapping around your chest like rope. They didn't taste the dust in their mouth, wonder if it was their last breath. I did. And I'll never forget it. One night, months later, I returned to the desert. Not to the cave. Just nearby. I stood at the edge of the canyon as the sun set. The sky bled orange and red. And I realized something. I wasn't afraid of the dark anymore. But I respected it. Because I had seen what it could do. What it could take. And what it gave back. If you fought for it. I don't tell people everything about what happened down there. Some things are mine. Some things I don't even understand myself. But here's what I do know. The cave didn't beat me. I escaped it. And every breath I take now, every sunrise, every quiet moment, is proof that even when the earth closes around you, you can claw your way back to the light. When you survive something like that, something that pushes you to the edge of death, the world you come back to feels both familiar and foreign at the same time. You expect things to be the same. You expect people to understand. You expect your own mind to be your ally. But the truth is far more complicated. The first thing I noticed after leaving the hospital was how much my mind betrayed me. I wanted to forget the cave, forget the darkness, forget the silence, but it wouldn't let me. The memories didn't come as sharp images or loud screams. No, they came slow, quiet, like a shadow creeping into every corner of my day. I'd be brushing my teeth, and suddenly the cold, damp walls would wrap around me. I'd be walking down the street, and the dust would fill my lungs. I'd be falling asleep and hear the drip, drip, drip of water echoing through the silence. Sleep was the worst. Every night, I returned to that underground world. The narrow tunnels, the crushing weight of stone, the dark that never ends. Sometimes I woke up screaming. Sometimes I just lay there, eyes wide, heart pounding, trapped in a nightmare with no escape. But there was no comfort in waking up, because the world outside felt harsh, unforgiving. My relationships suffered. Friends who didn't understand stopped calling. Some told me to move on or get over it. Others avoided me as if I carried something contagious, fear, or madness, or death itself. I didn't blame them. I was a different person. A person who sometimes stared off into space and lost hours to memories that weren't real, but felt more vivid than anything else. I started seeing a therapist. At first, I was reluctant. Talking felt like peeling a scab off a wound. Painful, exposing. But little by little, I learned to tell my story. Not the story of heroism or escape, but the story of survival, of fear, of hopelessness, of grit. One session, I described how I talked to the walls, how I sang lullabies to myself, how I imagined the cave was alive, watching, breathing, waiting. My therapist nodded slowly. "Your mind was protecting you," he said. creating stories, creating company, because no one is meant to face that kind of isolation alone. Over time, I developed coping mechanisms. I started mindfulness practices, breathing exercises, journaling. I learned to spot triggers, certain sounds, smells, even times of day that sent me spiraling back into the darkness. I learned to reach out when the weight became too much, to ask for help. I also realized something powerful. Survival isn't just about escaping physical danger. It's about navigating the invisible dangers that come after. The guilt, the memories, the scars you can't see. I began volunteering with search and rescue teams, helping others find their way out of darkness. It gave me purpose. It helped me make peace with what happened. But the memories stayed. Sometimes, when the world is quiet, I still hear the drip of water. I still feel the cold stone pressing in. I still see that man in the cave, waiting. I also carry hope. Hope that even in the darkest places, we can find light. That even when we are broken, we can rebuild. That even when the earth closes around us, there's a way out. Every day, I choose to live. Not just to survive, to live fully, to breathe deeply, to love fiercely. Because life, after all, is the greatest escape. If you ever find yourself trapped, whether underground or in the darkness of your mind, know this. You are not alone. There is a way forward. And even when everything feels impossible, you have the strength inside you to fight your way back to the surface. Coming back to the surface was only the beginning of my journey. In those first days, I thought surviving the cave meant I was done fighting, that once I breathed the fresh air, everything would fall back into place. I was wrong. The physical toll was brutal. My body was weak, muscles wasted from crawling and fighting for every inch of progress underground. My skin was bruised and raw. My knees ached constantly, and my hands bore scars that would never fully fade. Simple tasks like walking upstairs or carrying groceries felt overwhelming. I had to relearn how to trust my body. Every ache was a reminder. Every tremor a warning. Physical therapy became my new routine. Day after day, I pushed through pain I didn't think I could handle. At times, I wanted to give up. But then I remembered the darkness, the weight of the earth pressing down, the desperation in every breath. And I forced myself forward. Mental recovery was even harder. Flashbacks haunted me, moments in the cave replaying in vivid detail, triggered by the slightest noise or change in light. Nightmares stole my sleep. Anxiety wrapped around me like a vice. Depression knocked at the door more times than I can count. Therapy sessions became a lifeline. I learned to confront my fears rather than run from them. I practiced grounding techniques, naming objects in the room, focusing on my breath, reminding myself where I was. I opened up about my guilt, survivor's guilt, the feeling that I shouldn't be here when others weren't. Support came in unexpected ways. Friends I'd pushed away reached out. Strangers shared their own stories of trauma and healing. And slowly, I began to feel less alone. I discovered new ways to cope. Journaling my thoughts helped me process the chaos in my mind. Meditation gave me moments of peace. Exercise, even something as simple as a walk in the park, became a way to reclaim control. But recovery wasn't linear. Some days were better. Others, I felt like I was back in the cave, trapped, suffocating, lost. It was frustrating, humbling, and sometimes terrifying. Family played a complicated role. They wanted to help, but didn't always understand. There were moments of tension, anger, and silence. But over time, we found ways to communicate, to lean on each other. Their love became a shield I could hide behind when the darkness crept in. Work was another challenge. Returning to my job felt impossible at first. My mind was foggy. My concentration shattered. But I pushed through, setting small goals, answering an email, attending a meeting, finishing a project. Each success was a victory. I also found solace in nature. Not caves, not darkness, but open skies. I started hiking again, slowly, cautiously, feeling the sun on my face, the wind in my hair, the ground solid beneath my feet. It reminded me I was alive. Most importantly, I learned patience. With myself, with the process, with the scars, seen and unseen. Healing is messy. It's uncomfortable. It takes time. But every step forward is a step toward reclaiming life. There were moments I questioned if I would ever fully recover, if I'd ever feel whole again, if the darkness would ever truly let me go. But each morning I chose to rise, to face the day, to keep fighting. Today I still carry the cave with me, in my mind, in my body, but I refuse to let it define me. I am more than fear, more than pain, more than survival. I am a person who fought through hell and came out the other side. If you're listening to this and you're fighting your own battle, know this. Recovery is possible. Light can return, and you are stronger than you think. Every scar is a story, every breath a victory, and every day is a chance to write a new chapter. Survival is only half the story. What comes after? The long nights, the quiet battles, that's where the real fight begins. For me, the darkness didn't stay underground. It followed me home. It lived in the quiet moments, in the spaces between breaths, in the hollow of my chest. I learned quickly that trauma isn't something you just get over. It's a shadow. It lingers. It waits. Sometimes it roars like thunder. Other times it whispers like a ghost. There were days when the weight was unbearable. Days I felt like disappearing. Days when the past wrapped around me so tightly I couldn't breathe. I started having panic attacks, unexpected waves of terror, my heart pounding, my vision narrowing, the world closing in. I felt trapped all over again, but this time there was no physical cave, no walls to claw at, just my mind. It was terrifying, humiliating, lonely. But I refused to let it win. Therapy became a battlefield. Sessions where I confronted my fears, where I learned to name the voices in my head, where I discovered that acknowledging pain was the first step to healing. I faced memories I had buried deep, the darkness pressing in, the feeling of helplessness, the crushing silence. But I also found strength in vulnerability, in honesty, in connection. I began to meditate regularly, to breathe through the storm inside, to ground myself when the darkness threatened to swallow me whole. I took up journaling again, but this time it was different. I wrote not just to remember, but to understand, to find meaning, to forgive. Forgive myself for surviving. Forgive the cave for its cruelty. Forgive the man I saw in the darkness, the one who didn't make it. I found solace in stories of others who survived, who faced their own darkness, who found light on the other side. I connected with support groups, people who understood in ways others couldn't, people who listened without judgment, people who said, "You are not alone." Facing the darkness within meant embracing uncertainty, accepting that some days would be harder. That healing isn't linear. That progress comes in waves. But it also meant hope. Hope that the pain wouldn't last forever. Hope that light could grow inside even the deepest wounds. Hope that life could be beautiful again. Slowly, I started to reclaim myself, to find joy in small moments, to laugh again, to dream again. I learned to live with my scars, to carry them not as burdens, but as badges of survival. reminders of what I endured. Facing the darkness within isn't about forgetting the past. It's about making peace with it, finding meaning beyond survival. And most importantly, it's about choosing to live every single day. If you are struggling with your own darkness, know this: you are stronger than your pain, braver than your fears, and capable of finding light in the shadows. The road is hard, but you don't have to walk it alone. Reach out, speak up, hold on, because on the other side of darkness, there is hope, there is healing, there is life. Surviving something unimaginable has a way of changing everything. Not just how you see the world, but how you see yourself. After facing the darkness, both outside and within, I found myself at a crossroads. I could let the trauma define me, or I could let it refine me. The days after recovery felt like a blur, but slowly, pieces of a new vision began to form. I realized that my experience wasn't just a story of survival. It was a message, a calling, a reason to keep going beyond myself. I started to think about purpose, about legacy, about what I could do with the second chance I'd been given. I began speaking publicly, sharing my story at local groups, schools, and eventually larger events. Not to seek sympathy, but to inspire, to teach, to remind people that resilience is real. I connected with organizations dedicated to cave rescue and safety. Volunteering wasn't just a way to give back, it was a way to heal, to turn my trauma into hope for others. I also found a deep passion for mental health advocacy. I saw too many survivors who, like me, struggled silently. I wanted to break the stigma, to make help accessible, to remind people it's okay not to be okay. With every speech, every meeting, every small victory, I felt the weight of what I'd been through shift. From burden to purpose. My relationships deepened. I learned to be more present, more patient, more compassionate. I set new goals, not just for survival, but for living fully, traveling, learning, loving. Every morning became a choice, a chance to write a new chapter, to live with intention. But purpose doesn't erase pain. It coexists with it, a constant reminder of where you've been and where you're going. Sometimes when the night is still, I still feel the cave's cold breath. But I no longer fear it, because I have a mission now, a reason, a new purpose. And that purpose is simple: to live, to help, to shine a light in the darkness for myself and for others. If you are listening and searching for meaning after your own struggle, know this: purpose is waiting for you. You just have to find the courage to embrace it. When you face something that could have ended your life, you realize quickly one undeniable truth: no one survives alone. In the cave, I was physically alone. But out here, after, I was surrounded by people who mattered more than I'd ever understood. At first, it was my family. They had waited. They had worried. They had hoped. And when I finally came home, they held me like I was fragile glass. My mother's tears told me everything words couldn't. My father's silent presence grounded me when I felt adrift. My sister's laughter, fragile at first, became a beacon of normalcy. But the ordeal tested us all. There were moments of frustration. Moments where I pushed away because the weight inside was too heavy. Moments where they didn't know how to help. That's when friends stepped in. Some old, some new. Friends who listened without judgment. Friends who sat in silence with me when words failed. Friends who reminded me what it meant to be human. Luis, my caving partner, became a pillar. Our shared experience, the trauma, the survival, forged a bond impossible to break. He didn't try to fix me. He just stood by me. Jake's quiet strength gave me courage. Sometimes just knowing he was there was enough to face the next day. Beyond that, I found community. Support groups filled with people who understood. Survivors of trauma, loss, and darkness. Together, we built something healing. These bonds saved me. They reminded me that strength is found in connection. That vulnerability is not weakness. That healing is a journey best traveled together. Family dinners became sacred rituals. Friendship gatherings a source of laughter and light. Therapy groups a space for honesty and growth. I learned to ask for help, to say when I was struggling, to lean on others when I couldn't stand alone. And in return, I gave back. Listening, supporting, sharing. Those relationships became my anchor, my shield, my light. Because surviving the impossible is not just about your own fight. It's about the people who refuse to give up on you. If you're facing darkness, remember, reach out, trust someone. Let others be your strength. Together, we can face anything. Together, we survive. Together, we heal. After months of healing, I began to feel a restlessness, a whisper deep inside pulling me forward. The cave had marked me, but it hadn't broken me. The call to adventure wasn't loud. It was subtle, a flicker of curiosity, a spark of courage. I realized I wanted more than just to survive. I wanted to live, to explore, to push boundaries. At first, I hesitated. Old fears clung tightly. Memories of darkness pressed against my chest. But the call grew louder. I started small. Day hikes. Visiting places I once loved but had avoided. Feeling the wind on my face without panic. Then, a friend invited me on a climbing trip. My heart raced at the thought. But I said yes. That climb was more than a physical challenge. It was a confrontation. A reclaiming of power. A way to rewrite my story. Every handhold was a victory. Every step upward a defiance of fear. At the summit, I felt alive in a way I hadn't in years. That day, I knew. The cave had been just one chapter, not the whole story. I began planning bigger adventures. Backpacking trips. Kayaking expeditions. Even returning to caving, but this time with safety, preparation, and respect. Facing new challenges didn't erase the past, but it gave me hope, a reason to keep moving forward. I also began sharing my journey online, through videos, talks, and blogs, connecting with others who felt stuck or scared, showing them that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the choice to face it anyway. The call to adventure became my compass, guiding me through uncertainty, pushing me beyond comfort. And with every new step, I felt more like myself. Whole, free, alive. If you're listening, wondering if you can ever move forward, you can. The call to adventure is waiting. Take the first step. Surviving the impossible changes you forever. It leaves scars you carry, some visible, most hidden deep inside. But it also leaves something else, a legacy. I've come to realize that my story isn't just about me. It's about everyone who fights to see another sunrise. Everyone who chooses hope over despair. Everyone who refuses to give up, no matter how dark the night. The legacy is this: survival is strength. Resilience is power. And every breath is a gift. I think often about the man in the cave, the one who didn't make it out. His story is part of mine now, a reminder of how precious life is. I've dedicated myself to honoring him, to helping others avoid the fate he suffered, to sharing lessons learned the hard way. Through advocacy and education, I strive to make the world safer, to shine light on the dangers that lurk beneath the surface, to prepare those who dare to explore. But legacy isn't just about prevention. It's about connection. about building a community where no one feels alone, where stories are shared, wounds are healed, and hope is born. I hope my journey encourages others to find courage in their darkest hours, to keep moving forward, to believe in the impossible, because that's what survival truly is. Not just escaping death, but embracing life, fully, fiercely, gratefully. The cave tested me. It broke me. It changed me. But it did not define me. I am more than a survivor. I am a storyteller, a fighter, a beacon. And I choose to carry that legacy with pride. If you're out there facing your own impossible, remember, you are not alone. Your story matters, and the legacy you leave is yours to write. Thank you for listening, for sharing this journey, for believing in the strength of the human spirit.